It was just another quiet Tuesday morning in the small town of Riverside, when everything changed forever. People were going about their daily routines, shopkeepers opening their stores, kids walking to school, and elderly folks sitting on park benches feeding pigeons. Nobody expected their peaceful little world to be turned upside down. The first sign something was wrong came around 10 in the morning. Mrs. Johnson was hanging laundry in her backyard when she noticed the sky getting darker, even though there wasn't a cloud in sight. She looked up and gasped. A massive object was slowly descending from the heavens, blocking out the sun. The spacecraft was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It looked like a giant crystal that had been carved by angels, with surfaces that sparkled and reflected light in impossible ways. The thing was huge, easily the size of a football stadium, and it made no sound. As it floated down like a feather, people started coming out of their houses and shops, pointing at the sky and talking in hushed, worried voices. Some folks grabbed their phones to record what was happening, while others just stood there with their mouths hanging open. Children stopped playing in the streets and pressed against windows, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. The crystal ship landed gently in the town square, right where the old fountain used to be. For a few moments, nothing happened. The whole town held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Then, with a sound like wind chimes mixed with thunder, a door appeared in the side of the crystal. Ship light poured out, not harsh white light, but something soft and rainbow-colored that made everyone's skin look beautiful. And from that light stepped out the most incredible being anyone in Riverside had ever laid eyes on. She was tall and graceful, moving like she was dancing even when she was just walking. Her skin seemed to change colors as she moved, sometimes silver like moonlight, sometimes deep purple like the night sky. Her hair flowed behind her as if she was underwater, and her eyes glowed like stars. She was breathtaking, like something from a fairy tale. But the moment she opened her mouth, everyone realized this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. What is this pathetic excuse for a settlement? Her voice rang out across the square, somehow reaching every corner of the town even though she wasn't shouting. I have traveled across galaxies, and this is what I find: primitive structures, inefficient designs, and complete chaos in your organizational systems. Poor Mr. Thompson, who ran the local hardware store, happened to be closest to her. He tried to stammer out a greeting, but she cut him off immediately. And you? She pointed at him with a finger that seemed to glow. Your establishment is a disaster. Tools scattered everywhere with no logical system, pricing that makes no mathematical sense, and customer service that would shame a developing civilization. Mr. Thompson's face went red, then white. He'd been proud of his little store for 30 years. And here was this strange, beautiful creature tearing it apart with her words. He didn't know whether to argue, apologize, or run away. But she wasn't finished with him yet. Furthermore, the paint on your building is fading unevenly. Your display window has fingerprints that haven't been cleaned in days. And don't even get me started on your inventory management system. By now, a crowd had gathered, but instead of being curious, people were getting scared. This wasn't the friendly alien contact they'd seen in movies. This was more like having a very beautiful, very angry teacher who was disappointed in everything about you. The alien princess, because that's what she had to be. With the way she carried herself, moved through the crowd like a storm, she had something critical to say about everything and everyone. She told Mrs. Patterson that her flower garden was randomly planted, with no consideration for growth patterns or aesthetic harmony. She informed the local police chief that his patrol car was inefficiently maintained and poorly positioned. For optimal response times, when she reached the school, things got even worse. She watched the children playing during recess for exactly 30 seconds, before launching into a speech about how this chaotic play behavior serves no educational purpose and demonstrates a complete lack of structured development planning. The poor teacher, Miss Rodriguez, tried to explain that children need free playtime, but the alien princess just shook her head. On my world, young ones engage in activities that simultaneously develop physical coordination, mental acuity, and social cooperation. This random running about achieves nothing. What made it all worse was that she wasn't exactly wrong about some things. The town did have problems. The roads needed fixing. Some of the shops could be organized better. And yes, maybe the school could use some improvements. But the way she said everything made people feel terrible about themselves instead of wanting to do better. As the day went on, it became clear that this beautiful, terrifying visitor wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. She set up some kind of glowing platform in the center of the town square and announced that she would be conducting a full evaluation of this settlement's efficiency and potential for advancement. By evening, most people had locked themselves in their houses. Parents pulled their children inside and drew the curtains. The normally busy main street was empty except for the alien princess, who continued to pace around her glowing platform, muttering about primitive infrastructure and inefficient social systems. From his window at the small inn where he was staying, Dr. Alex Chen watched it all unfold. He'd come to Riverside to get away from the busy university where he taught astronomy, hoping for a quiet week to work on his research. Instead, he found himself witnessing what might be the most important event in human history. First, contact with an alien civilization. But unlike everyone else, Alex wasn't just scared or amazed. He was curious. He'd spent his whole life studying the stars and wondering what might be out there. Now, something from out there had come to him. And despite her harsh words and frightening behavior, he couldn't help but wonder what had brought her here, and why she seemed so angry at everything she saw. As night fell and the town settled into an uneasy quiet, the alien princess continued her patrol, her glowing eyes scanning every building, every street, every detail of their small human world. And Alex continued watching, trying to understand what he was seeing and wondering if anyone would ever be brave enough to actually talk to her instead of just hiding from her criticism. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new scolding, and new fears. But it would also bring the first real conversation between two very different worlds, though nobody knew it yet. 3 days had passed since the alien princess arrived, and life in Riverside had become something nobody could have imagined. What started as shock and fear had turned into a strange routine of daily criticism that had everyone walking on eggshells. Every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, the princess would step out of her crystal ship and begin what the townspeople had started calling the rounds. She walked through every street, examining everything with those glowing star-like eyes, and finding fault with whatever she saw. But something interesting was happening that most people were too scared to notice. Alex Chen, still watching from his window, had started keeping a notebook. He was writing down everything she said, and a pattern was beginning to emerge. On Wednesday morning, she stopped at Betty's Bakery and launched into her usual criticism. This establishment shows complete disregard for optimal nutrition distribution, she announced, her voice carrying that otherworldly authority that made everyone freeze. Your baking methods are inefficient, your ingredient combinations lack scientific basis, and your customer service flow creates unnecessary bottlenecks. Poor Betty stood behind her counter, flour still on her apron, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. She'd been baking for this town for 20 years, and her apple pies were famous 3 counties over. But the princess wasn't finished. Furthermore, the alien continued, walking around the small bakery with her hands behind her back like a general inspecting troops. Your display cases are positioned to create traffic confusion. Your pricing system is illogical, and the lighting in here is completely wrong for showcasing your products. Betty's eyes filled with tears. But then something unexpected happened. The princess pulled out what looked like a small glowing tablet and began showing Betty something on the screen. However, she said, her voice slightly less harsh, if you adjust your oven temperature by 12 degrees, modify your flour mixture with these proportions, and rearrange your layout like this, you could increase both nutritional value and customer satisfaction by 47%. Betty blinked in surprise. The suggestions, while delivered in the rudest way possible, were actually quite brilliant. The temperature adjustment would make her pastries more evenly baked. The The flour mixture would make them healthier without changing the taste. And the layout changes would definitely help with the morning rush crowd. Alex scribbled this down in his notebook. This was the third time he'd seen this pattern. The princess would start with devastating criticism, but then she'd offer solutions that were genuinely helpful. It was like she wanted to help but didn't know how to do it without being mean about it. Later that morning, she visited the town's small medical clinic where Dr. Williams worked. Alex followed at a distance, curious to see if the pattern would repeat. "This medical facility is woefully inadequate," the princess declared as she swept into the waiting room. Dr. Williams, a kind man who'd been taking care of the town's health for 15 years, tried to greet her politely, but she cut him off. "Your diagnostic equipment is primitive. Your treatment methods are decades behind optimal standards, and your patient management system creates unnecessary stress for those seeking care," she continued, examining everything with those piercing eyes. Dr. Williams looked hurt and confused. He'd always done his best with the limited resources a small town could provide. But then, just like with Betty, the princess pulled out her glowing tablet. "These modifications to your equipment will improve diagnostic accuracy by 60%, she said, showing him images of devices that looked far more advanced than anything he'd ever seen. "This treatment protocol will reduce recovery times significantly, and this scheduling system will eliminate patient wait times entirely." Dr. Williams leaned in, his professional curiosity overriding his hurt feelings. The technology she was showing him was incredible. It could help him save more lives and reduce suffering in ways he'd never dreamed possible. The same thing happened at the school, the fire station, and even at the small library. Harsh criticism followed by genuinely helpful solutions. It was like the princess had a completely different way of communicating that the humans just couldn't understand. But Alex was starting to understand something else. Every time the princess finished giving her advice and the humans started to look interested or grateful, something strange would happen to her expression. For just a moment, her fierce demeanor would crack, and something that looked almost like hope would flicker across her face. But then, when people still seemed scared or confused by her manner, that hope would disappear, and she'd become even more stern and critical. By Thursday afternoon, Alex had filled half his notebook with observations. The princess wasn't just randomly criticizing everything, she was trying to teach them, to help them improve. But her teaching style was so harsh and intimidating that people couldn't get past their fear to see the valuable information she was offering. He also noticed something else. When she thought no one was watching, the princess would sometimes stop walking and just stand still, looking round the town with an expression that wasn't angry or critical. It was lonely, deeply, profoundly lonely. On Thursday evening, Alex watched from his window as she stood alone in the town square beside her crystal ship. The rainbow lights from her vessel cast beautiful colors across her changing skin. But there was something sad about the way she held herself. She kept looking up at the stars, and Alex could swear he saw her shoulders slump with what looked like homesickness. That's when it hit him. This fierce, critical alien princess was far from home, probably on some kind of mission she couldn't abandon. She was trying to help them, but she didn't understand that humans needed kindness along with knowledge. She was stuck here, unable to connect with anyone, getting more frustrated and lonely each day. The townspeople had started avoiding the main streets during her rounds. Parents kept their children inside, shopkeepers closed early, and even the normally social elderly folks stopped gathering in the park. The town was becoming a ghost of itself, and the princess was becoming more isolated with each passing hour. But Alex could see what others couldn't. Behind all that criticism and harsh authority was someone who genuinely cared about making things better. She just didn't know how to show it in a way that humans could accept. As Friday morning approached, Alex made a decision. He couldn't just keep watching and taking notes. Someone needed to try talking to her, really talking to her, not just cowering and waiting for the criticism to end. Someone needed to see past the fierce exterior and try to understand what she was really trying to do. He didn't know if it would work, or if she'd just turn her critical attention on him. But watching her stand alone under the stars, he realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is try to understand someone who seems impossible to understand. Tomorrow, he decided, he would find out what happened when someone actually listened to the fierce alien princess instead of just being afraid of her. Friday morning came with a gray sky that matched the mood hanging over Riverside. Alex woke up early, his stomach full of butterflies. Today was the day he'd decided to actually approach the alien princess. But now that the moment was here, he wasn't so sure it was a good idea. He sat on the edge of his bed, looking out at the town square where her crystal ship gleamed in the morning light. What was he supposed to say to someone who could probably destroy the entire town with a thought? What if she turned her harsh criticism on him and he just froze up like everyone else? But then he remembered the look of loneliness he'd seen on her face the night before, and he knew he had to try. At exactly 8 o'clock, just like every morning, the princess emerged from her ship. Today she was wearing what looked like a flowing robe made of starlight that changed colors as she moved. Her hair seemed even more otherworldly than usual, floating around her head like she was underwater. Alex grabbed his notebook and headed downstairs. Mrs. Garcia, who ran the inn, was peeking through the kitchen curtains. "You're not going out there, are you?" she whispered, looking at Alex like he'd lost his mind. "She's heading toward the farmer's market. Those poor people are going to get another lecture about their primitive agricultural displays." Alex nodded and stepped outside. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure the princess could hear it from across the square. The farmer's market was usually the most cheerful part of Riverside's week. Local farmers would bring their fresh vegetables, Mrs. Chen would sell her homemade jams, and old Pete would display his prize-winning tomatoes with more pride than a parent showing off baby pictures. But today, as the princess approached, all that joy drained away like water from a broken bucket. "Attention, agricultural vendors," the princess announced, her voice cutting through the morning air like a sword. "I am here to evaluate your food distribution methods and provide necessary corrections to your obviously flawed systems." The farmers looked like they wanted to pack up and run, but there was nowhere to go. Pete stepped forward, probably because someone had to, and tried to smile. "Well, good morning, miss. We grow the best produce in 3 counties here, and we're always happy to—" Silence. The princess cut him off, walking between the tables with her hands clasped behind her back. "Your display methodology is completely chaotic. Vegetables are arranged by personal preference rather than nutritional categories or optimal customer selection flow. Your pricing appears to be based on emotional attachment rather than logical market analysis." Pete's face fell. He'd been farming for 40 years, and his father before him. These vegetables weren't just products to him, they were his life's work. But the princess wasn't done. She stopped at Mrs. Chen's jam table and shook her head. "Preserved fruit products with excessive sugar content, inadequate labeling systems, and storage methods that will reduce shelf life by 30%. Furthermore, your customer interaction protocols create inefficient transaction delays." Mrs. Chen looked like she might cry. Her jams had won blue ribbons at county fairs, and her grandmother's recipes had been passed down for generations. That's when Alex decided he couldn't wait any longer. While the princess was examining a display of corn and preparing to deliver another crushing critique, he walked straight into the market area. Several farmers noticed him and tried to wave him away, their eyes wide with warning. But Alex kept walking until he was standing right next to the princess, close enough to see the way her skin seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "Your corn cultivation shows evidence of inefficient spacing, inconsistent irrigation, and poor soil management," she was saying to Farmer Johnson, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. "These problems could be solved with proper scientific methods, instead of relying on outdated traditional—" "Excuse me," Alex said quietly. The princess stopped mid-sentence and turned toward him. Up close, her eyes were even more incredible-like, looking into twin galaxies filled with swirling stars. But there was something else there too, something that looked almost surprised that someone had interrupted her. Are you attempting to disrupt my evaluation process? She asked, her voice carrying that otherworldly authority that made most people stammer and back away. But Alex didn't back away. Instead, he looked directly into those star-filled eyes and did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He smiled. I've been watching you for 3 days, he said calmly. You've been trying to help everyone in this town, haven't you? The princess blinked, and for just a moment, her fierce expression wavered. I'm conducting necessary evaluations and providing optimization protocols for this primitive settlement, she said. But her voice didn't sound quite as certain as before. You're lonely, Alex continued, his voice gentle but clear enough for the farmers to hear. You're far from home, probably on some kind of mission. And you're trying to help us, but you don't understand why we keep getting scared instead of grateful. The market had gone completely silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The princess stared at Alex like he'd just spoken in a language she didn't expect him to know. You don't understand, she said, and for the first time, her voice sounded almost human. My methods are scientifically proven to produce optimal results. Efficient communication requires direct identification of problems followed by immediate solution. Implementation. But that's not how humans work, Alex said softly. We need to feel value before we can hear criticism. We need to know someone cares about us before we can trust their advice. The princess looked around at the farmers, who were watching this exchange with a mixture of fear and fascination, for the first time since arrival. She seemed to really see their faces not just as problems to be solved, but as people with feelings. I don't understand, she admitted, and her voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. On my world, improvement is valued above all else. Emotional considerations are seen as inefficient obstacles to progress. Alex felt his heart break. A little. For her, she really was trying to help. But she'd been raised in a world where kindness was seen as weakness. Your world sounds very advanced, he said, looking around at the beautiful vegetables and handmade jams that surrounded them. But maybe there's something you could learn from ours too. He turned to Pete, who was still standing there holding a perfect tomato. Pete, tell her about this tomato. Not just how you grew it, but why? Pete looked confused for a moment, then his face lit up. Well, this here is a Cherokee purple. My grandfather brought the seeds with him when he came to this country every year. I saved the best seeds to plant the next year, just like he taught me. It's not just about growing food, it's about keeping family memories alive, about taking care of the land so it can take care of future generations. The princess listened, her head tilted slightly to one side. This is inefficient from a purely agricultural standpoint, she said slowly. But it serves multiple purposes. Beyond nutrition distribution, exactly, Alex said, and Mrs. Chen's jams aren't just preserved fruit. They're made with love for her community. When someone buys her strawberry jam, they're not just getting food, they're getting a piece of her heart. The princess looked at Mrs. Chen, then at her jars of jam, then back at Alex. Something was changing in her expression, like ice slowly melting in spring sunshine. I think, Alex said, taking a deep breath, you are beautiful. The words hung in the air like music. The princess froze completely, her star-filled eyes wide with shock. Around them, the farmers held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Not just because you're obviously the most stunning being any of us have ever seen, Alex continued, his voice steady and sincere, but because you care so much about making things better that you travel across the galaxy to help strangers. Because you see problems and immediately want to fix them. Because underneath all that criticism, you have a heart that wants everyone to succeed. For a long moment, the fierce alien princess who had been terrorizing Riverside with her harsh words couldn't say anything at all. She just stood there, staring at Alex like he'd just shown her something she'd never seen before. And maybe, in a way, he had. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Alex stood there watching the princess, who seemed frozen in place like a statue made of starlight. Her mouth was slightly open, and those galaxy-filled eyes were staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Around them, The farmers waited with bated breath, not daring to move or speak. Finally, the princess took a small step backward, her hand reaching out as if she needed something to steady herself. But there was nothing there, just empty air, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked completely lost. I don't, she started to say, then stopped. Her voice, which had been so commanding and sure for days, now came out as barely a whisper. No one has ever said that to me before. Alex felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean? The princess looked around at the farmer's market, at the people who had been so afraid of her just moments before, then back at Alex. On my world, we are judged by our efficiency, our strength, our ability to solve problems quickly. Beauty is measured by how perfectly we can execute our duties, how flawlessly we can criticize and improve systems. She paused, and Alex could see something changing in her face. Like walls that had been built over years were suddenly cracking. But you said I was beautiful because I care, she continued, her voice growing stronger but somehow more vulnerable. At the same time, because I want to help. No one has ever seen that in me before. Old Pete, who had been holding his tomato this whole time, cleared his throat gently. Miss, if you don't mind me asking, where exactly do you come from? The princess turned to look at him, and Alex was amazed to see that her fierce expression had completely melted away. She looked tired, sad, and surprisingly young. A world very far from here, she said softly. A world that is dying. The farmers exchanged glances. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her grandmotherly instincts taking over despite her earlier fear. Dying. What's wrong with it? The princess closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they seemed to shimmer with tears made of starlight. Our planet used to be green and beautiful, like yours, but we became so focused on efficiency and perfection that we forgot how to take care of the living things that made it special. We optimized everything until there was no room left for growth, for change, for the messiness that life requires. She gestured around the farmer's market, at the slightly crooked tables and the vegetables that weren't all exactly the same size. We would never have allowed something like this on my world. Too chaotic, too inefficient. But now I see, this chaos is actually life, isn't it? Alex nodded. That's exactly what it is. Life is messy and imperfect and wonderful. My people sent me here to evaluate whether humans could be elevated. To help save both our worlds, the princess continued. I was supposed to determine if you were worth saving, if you could learn to be as efficient as we are. Farmer Johnson, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. And what's your conclusion? The princess looked around again, really seeing the market for the first time. She saw Pete's pride in his heritage tomatoes, Mrs. Chen's love in every jar of jam, the way the farmers cared more about feeding their community than maximizing profits. She saw the inefficiency that came from caring about people instead of just systems. I think, she said slowly, that I've been asking the wrong question. Instead of whether humans can learn to be like us, maybe the question is whether we can learn to be more like you. Alex felt a warmth spread through his chest. What do you mean? You care about things that aren't efficient, she explained, her voice growing more animated. Pete keeps his grandfather's seeds not because they're the most productive variety, but because they connect him to his family. Mrs. Chen makes jam by hand when machines could do it faster. Because she puts love into every batch. You all work together and help each other even when it would be more efficient. To just focus on yourselves, she turned back to Alex, and he was amazed to see that her expression was completely different now. The harsh authority was gone, replaced by something that looked like wonder. When you said I was beautiful for caring, you showed me something my world has forgotten. Caring isn't inefficient. It's the most important thing there is. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes with her apron. Honey, you've been trying to help us all along, haven't you? You just didn't know how to do it in a way we could understand. The princess nodded, looking embarrassed. On my world, pointing out problems, immediately followed by solutions, is considered the highest form of caring. I thought I was being kind by helping you optimize everything. But kindness isn't just about fixing problems, Alex said gently. It's about understanding that people need to feel valued and respected even when they're not perfect, especially when they're not perfect. Pete added with a chuckle. Perfection is boring. It's the flaws that make things interesting. The princess actually smiled at that, the first real smile anyone had seen from her. It transformed her entire face, making her look less like a fierce alien warrior and more like someone who was discovering joy. For the first time, would you? She started, then hesitated. Would you teach me how to help without hurting? How to care in a way that people can accept? The farmers looked at each other, then back at her. The fear was completely gone now, replaced by something that looked like protective affection. This powerful alien being who had terrified them for days was asking them, simple farmers, to teach her about kindness. Well, Mrs. Chen said, bustling over to her jam table, the first lesson is that kindness usually comes with food. Are you hungry, dear? The princess looked confused. Hunger is an inefficiency that should be eliminated as quickly as possible with optimal nutrition. Everyone laughed, not in a mean way, but with the warm laughter of people who were beginning to understand each other. No, Mrs. Chen said, holding up a jar of strawberry jam. Eating isn't just about nutrition. It's about taking time to enjoy something good, about sharing experiences with others. Here, try this. She opened the jar and offered the princess a small spoon. The princess took it hesitantly, tasted it, and her eyes went wide. This is wonderful, she said, sounding amazed. It's not just fuel. It's happiness. I can taste happiness. Alex felt tears prick his eyes. That's what Mrs. Chen was trying to tell you. She doesn't just make jam. She makes happiness that people can share. For the next hour, something magical happened in that little farmer's market. The princess, who had spent days criticizing everything she saw, began to learn. The farmers, who had been terrified of her, began to teach. They showed her how Pete's imperfect tomatoes carried stories, how Mrs. Chen's simple jam was made with love, how their whole community worked not because it was efficient, but because they cared about each other. And slowly, the fierce alien princess who had never been called beautiful for her heart began to understand that sometimes the most important things in the universe can't be measured or optimized. Sometimes, the most beautiful thing you can do is simply care about someone else, even if it's not the most efficient way to live. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the transformation was complete. The terrifying critic had become a curious student, and the frightened farmers had become patient teachers. And Alex, watching it all unfold, realized that he was witnessing something truly incredible. Two different worlds learning to understand each other, one act of kindness at a time. 3 weeks had passed since that magical morning at the farmer's market, and Riverside had become a completely different place. The town that had once cowered in fear was now buzzing with excitement and wonder. Children played in the streets again, but now they also learned amazing things from their beautiful alien friend who had become so much more than anyone could have imagined. The princess, who had finally told them her name was Zara, which meant blooming flower in her language, had undergone a transformation that seemed impossible. The fierce critic who had once terrified everyone had become the town's most beloved teacher, friend, and helper. Every morning now, instead of harsh evaluations, Zara would walk through town with a smile that could light up the darkest day. She'd learn to start every conversation with something positive, just like Alex had taught her. Good morning, Pete, she said as she approached his vegetable stand, her voice warm and musical instead of commanding. Your tomatoes are looking absolutely beautiful today. I can see how much love you put into growing them. Pete beamed with pride. Thanks, Zara. Want to see something cool? I tried that soil improvement technique you suggested, but I mixed it with my grandfather's old method. Look how well they're growing. Zara examined the plants with genuine excitement. Over the past weeks, she learned that the best solutions came from combining her advanced knowledge with human wisdom and experience. Pete's tomatoes were indeed thriving, bigger and healthier than ever before, but still carrying the unique flavor that made them special. This is incredible, she said. her eyes sparkling. You've created something that's both scientifically optimal and emotionally meaningful. This is exactly what my world needs to learn. At the bakery, Betty was pulling fresh bread from an oven that had been upgraded with some of Zara's technology, but still used Betty's family recipes and techniques. The result was bread that stayed fresh longer and was more nutritious, but still tasted like the comfort food everyone loved. The breakfast rush was amazing today, Betty called out as Zara approached. That new scheduling system you suggested really helped, but keeping my grandma's recipe for the cinnamon rolls was the perfect touch. Zara clapped her hands together with delight. She'd learned to express joy in human ways, and it made her even more beautiful than before. I'm so glad. You taught me that efficiency means nothing if it doesn't make people happy. Dr. Williams had perhaps benefited the most from Zara's help. His clinic now had diagnostic equipment that seemed like magic to the townspeople, but he still spent time talking with his patients, holding their hands when they were scared, and treating them like family rather than just medical cases. Mrs. Henderson's arthritis is responding wonderfully to the new treatment, he told Zara when she stopped by for her daily visit. But I think what's helping her most is that she feels heard and cared for. You were right. Healing isn't just about fixing problems. Alex watched all of this from his usual spot at the inn, though he spent less time observing and more time participating now. He and Zara had become close friends, spending hours talking about everything from astronomy to philosophy. She was teaching him about the wonders of her advanced civilization, while he helped her understand the beauty of human imperfection. But today was different. Today, Zara had called a town meeting for something important. As the sun began to set, people gathered in the town square around her crystal ship. The ship itself had changed too. Instead of looking like a cold, intimidating fortress, Zara had somehow made it more welcoming. Soft, colorful lights danced across its surface, and comfortable seating had appeared around it. My dear friends, Zara began, and Alex felt his heart skip at the warmth in her voice. 3 weeks ago, I came to your beautiful town with a mission, to evaluate whether humans could help save my dying world. I thought I was here to teach you how to be more like us. She paused, looking around at all the faces that had become so precious to her. Children sat cross-legged on the grass, their parents behind them, the farmers, the shopkeepers, the teachers, everyone who had helped transform her from a lonely critic into someone who truly understood the meaning of community. But you taught me something far more important, she continued. You showed me that efficiency without kindness is meaningless, that perfection without love is hollow, that the things that make life truly beautiful can't be measured or optimized. They can only be felt. Mrs. Chen raised her hand like a shy student. What does this mean for your world, dear? Zara's expression grew serious, but not in the frightening way it used to. Now her seriousness came from deep caring rather than harsh judgment. I've been sending reports to my people every day, she said. At first, they were confused by what I was describing. How could an efficiency be valuable? How could emotion improve outcomes? But then I started sending them recordings of our daily life here. She gestured toward her ship, and suddenly a holographic image appeared in the air above them. It showed Pete teaching her about his grandfather's farming wisdom, Mrs. Chen sharing jam and stories, children laughing as they played games that had no productive purpose except joy. When my people saw these images, something incredible happened, Zara continued. Our oldest leaders, the ones who remember when our world was green and alive, began to weep. They said they had forgotten what we lost when we chose perfection over love. Alex felt a lump form in his throat. What are they going to do? They're coming here, Zara said, and her smile was radiant. Not to conquer or evaluate, but to learn. They want to remember how to care for living things instead of just optimizing them. They want to save our world by learning what you've taught me, that the most important things can't be improved, only cherished. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Aliens coming to learn from them? It seemed impossible, but then again, 3 weeks ago, no one would have believed that their fierce alien critic would become their dearest friend. But there's something else, Zara said, and her voice became softer. She looked directly at Alex. They've asked me to stay here permanently, to serve as an ambassador between our worlds, to help build a future where both civilizations can learn from each other. Alex felt his heart soar. The thought of Zara leaving had been haunting him for days, but he'd been too afraid to ask about her plans. Of course, she continued, I can only stay if this community wants me here. I know I didn't make the best first impression. The answer came not in words, but in action. Beat stood up first, then Betty, then Dr. Williams, then Mrs. Chen. One by one, every person in the square rose to their feet, applauding not just with their hands but with their hearts. Children ran forward to hug her legs. Adults came to shake her hands or pat her shoulders. Mrs. Chen, tears streaming down her face, pressed a jar of her special strawberry jam into Zara's hands. Your family now, the old woman said simply. Family doesn't leave family. As the celebration continued around them, Alex found himself standing next to Zara, both of them watching the joyful chaos of their community coming together. You know, he said quietly, when I first called you beautiful, I had no idea how right I was. Zara looked at him, her star-filled eyes shining with tears of pure happiness. When you said that, you gave me something I never knew I was missing. You gave me a heart that could see beauty in imperfection, value in inefficiency, and love in the messiest, most wonderful parts of life. She gestured toward the celebration around them, where humans and soon-to-be arriving aliens would learn to build something better together. This is what true beauty looks like, she said. Not perfection, but connection. Not efficiency, but caring. Not optimization, but love. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the fierce alien princess who had once scolded everyone finally understood that the most beautiful thing in any universe is simply the willingness to see beauty in others and help them see it in themselves. The future would bring challenges, certainly. Two very different civilizations learning to work together was bound to have its difficulties. But with Zara as their bridge between worlds, and with the foundation of kindness and understanding they had built together, both species would have something precious that neither had possessed alone: hope, love, and the chance to create something truly beautiful together.